and welcome to the Healthcare CEO Show, where you'll find actionable insights on healthcare leadership from the best and brightest in the industry. I'm your host, Daniel Fernandez. Let's get a pulse. This season on the show, we're going to be taking a closer look at the intersection of M&A in the healthcare industry. Joining me today, I have Dr. Emilio Justo, who is the founder and medical director of the Arizona Eye Institute and Cosmetic Laser Center. Dr. Justo, thank you for joining me on the show today.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. It's a privilege and a pleasure, and look forward to the opportunity and getting to know each other.
Great. Now, before we dive into your M&A journey, let's take it back to the early years, because as an ophthalmologist, you had the clear vision to see some opportunities maybe others in your space didn't. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, I'm not sure what you're referring to exactly, other than in my ophthalmology journey, right? I started as a traditional general ophthalmologist doing, eye care in general, cataract surgery, glaucoma, diabetes, macular degeneration, etc. But because I was fortunate in my residency that I had a strong oculoplastics background and training, that I straight out of the chute out of residency, in addition to doing the run-of-the-mill primary eye care stuff, I was also doing oculoplastics, bread and butter stuff, blepharoplasties, eyelid muscle tightening, ectropions, entropions, etc. So I decided within the first probably 7 to 8 years of my practice that I would diversify. And within one of our newer offices that I built, we built a med spa where we would do non-surgical cosmetic procedures. But then I really started going down the path of adding more and more cosmetic-related surgeries, such as not just blepharoplasties, which I learned to do CO2 laser blepharoplasty, but also I did postgraduate training on learning to do liposuction, facelifts, endoscopic brow lifts, things that most traditional ophthalmologists don't really delve into. But it really was an incredible opportunity, and it diversified the practice. I still continue to do all the primary eye care and cataract surgery, and so it's been quite a journey. And now that I'm hitting those later years, which I'm still very active and working full time, I just started my 36th year of practice just a few weeks ago. But now I've consolidated into primarily refractive cataract surgery and my oculoplastics, which is mainly the laser blepharoplasty. So I'm not sure if that's what you were wanting to get out of me, but that's the way I interpreted it.
That is perfect. Let's talk about maybe some of the business aspects as well, because in the healthcare space, personally, I've been involved in a lot of practices that have grown to, different facilities and locations, and there's always been, the inking of lease agreements, but that's not exactly your approach. You took it a little bit differently, right?
Yes. So basically the first 5 years of practice, again, I kind of took the traditional role, and I had a lease in a medical office space, a medical complex, if you will. It was a beautiful office, a large office, but it was kind of hidden. Right, it wasn't on the main street or anything. Now, as I approached the last year of that 5-year lease, my then office manager suggested that I consider purchasing a building, and I thought, wow, I hadn't really thought about that. But then, we started looking, and there was a building for sale that was on a very, very busy street in what's called Sun City, Arizona, which is in a northwest part of Phoenix, kind of a retirement area. And long story short, I ended up purchasing that building and completely rehabbed it. Other than the exterior walls, everything was demolished, and it was quite a process. I didn't quite anticipate the challenges just from the architectural and construction standpoint. But it really started my journey in terms of this new concept of owning your own real estate and renting from yourself. And that, again, has turned out to be just one of the best decisions that I've made in my whole practice journey. Because let me tell you, Daniel, I've made plenty of mistakes and big mistakes, financial mistakes. But there are certain things that I did do as I look back, and this is one of them, that I would really advise to every single physician, with very few exceptions, that if you can own your own real estate, man, do it, because there's just so many advantages financially to doing that as opposed to just, throwing your money away renting office space.
That's really good advice. And as you mentioned, success isn't a linear pathway for sure. It's ebb and flows quite a bit. Yeah.
Right.
Now, you've been in practice for 36 years. At what point in your journey do you decide that, maybe you're looking for, some financial backing, or what does that journey look like?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, the financial backing that I've had in my journey has really been the backing, number one, of the real estate. Obviously, unless you're an heir to tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, which I'm not, being an immigrant, that I had to have, of course, loans, construction loans, mortgages, etc. Then insofar as purchasing capital equipment, yes, there are loans in terms of purchasing capital equipment, but typically well worth it if you really analyze things, which I did not always do. So I purchased some really, really super expensive equipment in the past that really did not pay for themselves and was a complete bust. And had I been able to do it over again, I certainly wouldn't have done that. But at the same time, I've purchased some equipment that's really cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars that has been extraordinarily worth it. So you just have to analyze things, really put pen to paper. And one of the things that I've found over the years, in my early years, I always wanted to be the first, right? The first to do a new procedure, the first to have a new technology. And that's okay. I mean, the advantage is that when you are the first, you get that initial wave of patients coming in and the hype that's perhaps out in the media about a new procedure. But that new procedure doesn't always pan out. And there's some procedures that I jumped into that did not pan out. So as I've progressed in my journey, I've taken a little bit more conservative approach where I'm not so concerned about being the first. I don't mind being the second, third, fourth, or even fifth, and really letting that new procedure run its test of time to make sure that indeed it's going to be a good piece of equipment, a good procedure, something that is going to have a good return on investment. And I really think, in retrospect, if I were teaching a new physician, I would have them resist the temptation to be the first, because it can be wonderful, but it can also be bad.
It's excellent advice, because there's this added pressure of always trying to be the first, especially in a highly competitive market.
Correct.
Everybody's looking for that differentiator, so that makes perfect sense. Now, you're looking to sell the practice. What does that process look like? Did you work with a broker? Did you speak directly to maybe some PE firms? What did that look like?
Great question. I mean, before answering that directly, let me rewind a little bit. Part of what made the sale of, at least in my situation, the practice, extremely valuable and enticing to private equity is the fact that not only did I have several locations, I mean, technically I have 3 locations. One of them is a satellite location and 2 full-time locations. But in the second full-time location, which happens to be the one that I referenced earlier when I talked about building the med spa, but in addition to that, in that location, I built an ambulatory surgical center. And it's a small one because I'm the only surgeon, so it's just one operating room. But still, it is a full AAAHC accredited, state licensed, Medicare certified ambulatory surgery center. And in today's medical economics, surgery centers are really highly valuable. I would think that they're more valuable than the actual practice itself. So that really makes it very enticing for private equity. So for those physicians out there who are looking for an exit strategy down the road, whether it be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, if there's any feasibility, if you happen to be a surgeon, not all physicians are surgeons, of course, but if you happen to be a surgeon and have the ability to build your own ambulatory surgical center, that's something worth considering. But I will caution you that in and of itself has its own set of challenges and headaches insofar as all the rules and regulations and architectural requirements. It's incredibly complex. I mean, just nothing like building an office. Building an office is a piece of cake compared to building a surgical center. Now, getting back to your original question, so in my situation, I actually had a broker who kept contacting me and just wouldn't stop. And finally, I decided after rescheduling a couple times, I finally decided I would have that initial conversation on the phone with him, and I did. And it was interesting. I thought, well, this might be something worth looking at. And of course, as brokers typically do, is that they'll do a kind of a brief analysis, that they'll gather just the basic financial information from you and practice information, and then they'll do their own internal analysis of what they feel in general, without any commitment, but what they feel would be a very conservative value of your practice and how marketable it would be. And since by this time I was 32 years into my practice, and I wasn't planning on retiring anytime soon. I'm still not planning on retiring anytime soon. But the thought had occurred to me, what is going to be my exit strategy, right? Because it's very hard nowadays to just, like when I started practice, it was commonplace that doctors would sell their practice to a new doctor, right? That was 35 years ago. A doctor sells to another doctor. But nowadays, I think that's extraordinarily uncommon because it's just difficult. I mean, it's difficult for a new doctor to have the financial wherewithal to be able to purchase someone else's practice. And even if they did have the financial wherewithal, there's still the risk for that new doctor of acquiring a new practice. Is it going to pay off? Are they going to be able to pull it off? So the private equity started, kind of teasing me a little bit. I thought, wow, this could actually work, and I could sell the practice, kind of get those responsibilities off my back, while at the same time allowing me to continue to work until such time that I decide that I want to retire.
Yeah. How does it feel to go from being the chief decision maker, essentially, to not after a deal like that?
I got to admit, it was a little bit of a challenge early on, especially I would say the first year to year and a half, because before, I made all the decisions, and given the number of years I've been in practice, I kind of feel like I know certain things about my community, about the economics of my practice, where I have an insight that maybe an outside company doesn't have that insight. So it was difficult. I'll be honest. That was the most difficult thing, is kind of learning to let go. But as time goes by, you do learn to let go. And even now, I mean, I'm 4 years into it now. So I sold my practice 4 years ago. And even to this point now, I mean, I pretty much let go. But when I look at some of the decisions that are made and the way things are handled, honestly, I feel that certain things are not handled efficiently. But, who am I to judge? I'm not going to really, I'm kind of staying out of it. I'll speak my mind. And when I do speak with the higher ups and we occasionally have a meeting, I'll let them know some concerns that I have. I'm not so sure that they take them to heart that much, but at least I've voiced my concern, my opinion, and it's up to them if they want to act on it or not.
That makes sense. Now, as the founder, you're also the chief visionary for a company as well, and part of that, shapes the culture of the organization. So, how are you able to maintain that culture, through this process?
Well, I think the advantage that I had is, and still have, is that even during the practice acquisition by private equity, prior to that, we had quite a number of employees, I mean, a significant number that had significant tenure in the practice. And I'm not talking about just some employees who had been there 8 or 10 or 12 years, but we had a number of them, probably about a half a dozen employees that had been with me over 2 decades.
Wow.
And they're still there. So one of the wonderful things has been that because of their loyalty and I think their trust in me, that they stayed on board. Because certainly when it was announced to the staff that another company had bought out the practice, I could tell that there was a little, concern, and people didn't know if their futures were in jeopardy. And I get it, but I tried to really calm everything down, and everyone stood in the practice. I mean, no one just jumped ship. So that was a wonderful thing. So I think the fact that I had that culture and I had those employees in place made it a little bit easier. If I had just a very junior staff that had only been with me 2 or 3 years, then it might have been a little bit more difficult. But yeah, so as we sit here today, I mean, I have probably 5, 6 staff that have been with me 20 years. Some have been with me almost 25 years now. So it's been quite a blessing over the years. That they've really helped the practice grow, and they've really kept it stable.
It's no secret that in healthcare, recruitment and retention is pretty much at the forefront of a lot of decision making that's happening today, just because there is so much of that happening. In terms of being part of a larger organization, were there some advantages that came with that?
Well, for me personally, the biggest advantages were the fact that I didn't have the stress and the headaches of managing the practice, of having to coordinate the payroll and the human resources and the day-to-day operations. Even though, I had an administrator who did all of that, but I still kind of oversaw that, and I was very, very hands-on. I learned early in my professional career, probably in the first 10 to 12 years of my practice, I was very hands-off when it came to the administration of the practice, the economics of the practice, the accounts payables of the practice, and I must say I made some really serious mistakes, and I kind of got burned. And I learned very quickly that as a solo, maybe not practitioner, because I have 2 other physician, medical optometrist employees, but still as the sole owner of the practice, you have to be integrally involved. I mean, you have to put in that attention to detail, and that involves putting in extra time. So it would be commonplace that I would spend an extra hour or 2 at the office almost every night, just looking at everything, overseeing everything. I would sign all the checks. I learned that, again, that was one of the mistakes I made early on, is I handed over the accounts payables and the check signing to someone else. I quickly learned that's a bad idea. And so I was signing all the checks, reviewing all the invoices, etc. Now it's great, because now all I have to do is just show up, and I'm there for my patients. I see them in clinic. I do surgery 3 days a week, so I'm there for my patients, and it's such a stress reliever. So now I can devote that time that I devoted to the management aspects, I can devote to other things, such as being here with you today.
That sounds perfect, and we appreciate you being here. Now, looking ahead, where does the practice go from here? It seems like now that you've taken some of those things off your plate, you have more time to focus on the future. So what does the future look like, the practice?
Well, for the practice, I think it's more of the same, and maybe continuing to grow it. I know that we're looking for another eye surgeon, another ophthalmologist, because right now, again, we have our ambulatory surgery center that's located in one of our practices, and I operate 3 days a week, but 2 days a week, that ambulatory surgery center is basically sitting there empty. So,
Right.
so we are looking for another physician to, do surgery and keep the practice going and busy. And if I'm away on vacation, that's even more time that they can operate. So that's the main thing. And ultimately, hopefully, we'll get to a point that maybe we could even look for an additional office. I know our satellite office, which we've had for a very long time, but it's been just getting busier and busier. And so we're looking for more, more physicians to help staff that office. It's a little bit more rural, so it's harder to find a physician who wants to drive out there, but it's certainly very, very busy. So we just want to keep the practice growing, and I want to keep practicing. I love what I do. I love interacting with patients, and I love doing surgery. So just more of the same. Let's just kick it up a notch.
That sounds great. ASC utilization is very, very smart. We've seen this in orthopedics where, you've got toggling surgical days. So if a surgeon's working, Tuesday, Wednesday, then someone else could be in that same ASC on Thursday and Friday, or Friday and Monday. And
Correct. Because, the ASC facility reimbursement really is, that's actually in the last few years, that's gone up a little bit each year. Whereas the professional reimbursement keeps going down. So I think private equity really, really likes the whole ASC model because they can really generate nice revenue from that.
They do. Now, you talked about potentially, integrating another team. And I always have the visual of like a team of like Vikings and a team of like hippies in the same room. And then you just have to sing Kumbaya and everybody has to work together overnight. But it doesn't always happen like that. So are there maybe some considerations that you would have before ever integrating two teams, or maybe somebody who's in your space who's looking at integrating another team very soon, but they don't necessarily know how to go about it?
Well, in our situation, when you say two different teams, really we look at it as one team. We're not looking to bring in a different specialty, for example. I know that some ambulatory surgery centers do that, and those are typically the ones that are freestanding, that are larger. Again, our ambulatory surgery center is actually within the same roof, the same building as one of our clinics. So when you walk into the clinic, you don't even know that there's an ambulatory surgery center there. You have to go through a doorway to actually enter the ambulatory surgery center. So the patients aren't even aware of that. So it's kind of a unique situation that most offices don't have, is we have the ambulatory surgery center and the clinic and the med spa all under one roof. So for us, it's really just one team. We're not really integrating two different teams where they have to somehow melt together. It's all just one team.
That sounds great. Final question of the day. This is always a good one for me. There's a saying, leaders are readers. Is there a favorite business or leadership book that you've read that has been impactful on your journey that you'd want to share?
Yeah, I have gotten into the audiobook realm, right, which I wish I had done that 20, 30 years ago, since I have a long drive to work every day. It's almost a 1 hour, one-way drive to work. And years ago, I used to just listen to music, and it was nice, but it was really kind of a waste of time. But in the last few years, I've gotten into audiobooks, and so I listen to a lot of them. And a lot of the audiobooks that I listen to are kind of more, let's call it personal development, which can be applied to professional work, right? So I've been a huge fan for 30, 35 years of pretty much everything that Tony Robbins does. So I've read a lot of his books. I've been to a ton of his live workshop events. I've done the fire walking multiple times and all that sort of stuff. Also, I'm a big fan of Grant Cardone. I've read a bunch of his books. I particularly like one that really blends very much with I'm also a public speaker, so I've done a couple of TEDx talks. And my last TEDx talk earlier this year was on the obsession advantage to unprecedented success, whereby I flip the connotation of obsession from a negative connotation to a positive connotation. And it just so happens, unbeknownst to me, a book I recently read is from Grant Cardone that talks about a similar thing. It's called Be Obsessed or Be Average. And it really just hits home to me, because I think in life and in your business and your professional career, as well as in your personal career, is that you have to be obsessed about your goals. And it's not a negative obsession. It's not about an unhealthy fixation. It's about, achieving your dreams, your goals, and putting your mind to it and working your butt off to achieve those goals. And so I mean, I could go on and on. I mean, I love audiobooks in terms of a whole bunch of them. I'm a big fan of the late, great Jim Rohn. I don't know if you've heard of Jim Rohn, but again, a very, very inspirational, motivational speaker. Les Brown, who's kind of in his older years, another great motivational speaker with books out there. I'm actually hoping to co-author a book with him coming up in early 2025. So yeah, I could go on and on. I love talking about books, and I love talking about personal development and motivation. That's kind of one of the things I enjoy. I actually just to mention briefly, I just got back a couple weeks ago from Cambridge University in the United Kingdom, and I gave a speech there on, and you'll appreciate this, having a little bit of Cuban background yourself. My speech was titled Mastering the American Dream, the Cuban Triad for Triumphant Success. And that triad is self-discipline, resilience, and delayed gratification. That is the Cuban triad that, as an immigrant coming over from Cuba at a young age, I feel that those three things is what has allowed me to achieve what I've achieved in my life.
That I cannot think of a better way to bring the show to a close. And with that, Dr. Justo, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you, Daniel. It's been a delight, a privilege. I love getting to know you, a fellow Cuban, and look forward to another opportunity.
Thank you for joining us on the Healthcare CEO Show. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform for more insights from the top. Until next time, lead boldly and care deeply. See you on the next episode.